Hello, Lightseekers. Have you ever noticed someone who seems to attract positivity and success with ease, no matter the challenges life throws at them? In our fast-paced world, finding individuals who emit high vibrations can feel like discovering a hidden gem. These individuals often have unique traits that set them apart, traits that many people overlook or rarely discuss. If you've ever wondered what makes these high-vibration people so special, you're in the right place. In this video, we will reveal 5 secret signs of high-vibration people that no one talks about. These signs go beyond the obvious indicators like positive thinking or a calm demeanor. Instead, we'll explore the deeper, more subtle characteristics that truly distinguish high-vibration individuals from the rest. From their effortless ability to manifest their desires to the magnetic aura they naturally possess, these traits are both fascinating and inspiring. By understanding these hidden signs, you can learn to recognize high-vibration individuals in your own life, and perhaps even cultivate some of these traits within yourself. Whether you're on a personal journey of spiritual growth or simply looking to surround yourself with more positive influences, knowing these secrets can make a significant impact. So, get comfortable and prepare to dive into the world of high vibrations. By the end of this video, you'll have a newfound appreciation for the unique qualities these individuals possess. And remember, if you find this content enlightening and want to learn more about elevating your own vibration, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Let's embark on this enlightening journey together. High-vibration people have a remarkable ability to manifest their desires effortlessly. This isn't merely about achieving material goals. It's about aligning their thoughts and actions with their true intentions. They understand that their energy and focus directly influence their reality, and they use this knowledge to create positive outcomes in their lives. Effortless manifestation is a result of their high vibrational state, which naturally attracts abundance and opportunities. These individuals aren't just lucky. They are consciously co-creating their reality with the universe. Their positive mindset and unwavering belief in their goals play a crucial role in bringing their dreams to fruition. Moreover, high-vibration people are adept at visualizing their desired outcomes. They can vividly imagine their goals as already achieved, which significantly boosts their manifestation power. This practice of visualization, combined with their positive energy, helps them attract the right people, circumstances, and resources needed to accomplish their aspirations. Another key aspect of effortless manifestation is their ability to remain detached from the outcome. High-vibration individuals focus on the process rather than obsessing over the end result. This detachment allows them to stay relaxed and open to various possibilities, enhancing their ability to attract what they desire without undue stress or pressure. Their gratitude practice is a cornerstone of their manifestation success. High-vibration people consistently express gratitude for what they already have, creating a powerful energy of appreciation that attracts even more blessings into their lives. This gratitude mindset reinforces their high vibrational state, making effortless manifestation a natural part of their existence. One of the most noticeable traits of high vibration people is their joyful presence. These individuals radiate happiness and positivity, making them a pleasure to be around. Their joy isn't dependent on external factors. It stems from within and reflects their deep connection with their inner selves. High-vibration individuals find joy in the simplest of things, whether it's a beautiful sunset, a child's laughter, or a heartfelt conversation. They have an innate ability to appreciate life's little moments. This constant state of joy enhances their overall well-being and attracts positive experiences into their lives. Their joyful presence also has a ripple effect on those around them. High-vibration people uplift the energy of any room they enter, spreading positivity and light wherever they go. Their joy isn't dependent on external factors. It comes from within and reflects their deep connection with their inner selves. High-vibration individuals find joy in the simplest things, whether it's a beautiful sunset, a child's laughter, or a heartfelt conversation. They have an innate ability to appreciate life's little moments. This constant state of joy enhances their overall well-being and attracts positive experiences into their lives. Their joyful presence also has a ripple effect on those around them. High-vibration people uplift the energy of any room they enter, spreading positivity and light wherever they go. Their infectious enthusiasm and genuine happiness inspire others to adopt a similar outlook on life, creating a positive chain reaction. Moreover, high-vibration individuals practice self-love and self-care, which contributes to their joyful demeanor. They understand the importance of nurturing their physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being, ensuring they remain in a state of balance and harmony. This self-care routine includes activities like meditation, exercise, healthy eating, and engaging in hobbies they love. Their joyful presence also stems from their ability to let go of negativity. High-vibration people don't dwell on past hurts or hold on to grudges. Instead, they focus on forgiveness and healing, allowing them to maintain a light and joyful energy. This positive attitude enables them to navigate life's challenges with grace and resilience. High-vibration people often exhibit radiant health, both physically and mentally. Their high vibrational state naturally supports their overall well-being, making them less susceptible to illnesses and more resilient in the face of health challenges. This state of vibrant health is not merely about the absence of disease but a glowing, energetic presence that reflects their inner balance and harmony. One primary reason for their radiant health is their mindful approach to nutrition. High-vibration individuals are conscious of what they put into their bodies, opting for high-vibrational foods that nourish and energize them. They prioritize fresh, whole foods like fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, which support their physical health and enhance their vitality. By avoiding processed and junk foods, they minimize the intake of toxins and maximize the nutrients that fuel their bodies. These individuals often incorporate superfoods into their diets, foods exceptionally high in nutrients and antioxidants. Examples include berries, leafy greens, chia seeds, and spirulina. Superfoods provide a significant boost to their immune systems and overall energy levels, helping them maintain optimal health and well-being. Their diet is not just about eating healthy. It's about fueling their bodies with foods that align with their high vibrational energy. In addition to a healthy diet, high-vibration people maintain an active lifestyle. They understand the importance of regular physical activity in keeping their energy levels high and their bodies strong. Whether it's through yoga, hiking, dancing, or any other form of exercise, they make movement a regular part of their routine. Exercise helps release endorphins, the body's natural feel-good chemicals, which further contribute to their radiant health. Physical activity also enhances their mental health by reducing stress and anxiety, leading to a balanced state of mind. Mental health is equally important to high-vibration individuals. They engage in practices that promote mental clarity and emotional stability, such as meditation, journaling, and mindfulness. These activities help them manage stress, stay focused, and maintain a positive mindset, all of which contribute to their radiant health. Meditation, in particular, allows them to quiet their minds, connect with their inner selves, and release any negative energy that might be affecting their well-being. High-vibration people also prioritize rest and relaxation. They recognize the importance of quality sleep and ensure they get enough rest to rejuvenate their bodies and minds. Adequate sleep is crucial for repairing and regenerating cells, maintaining a healthy immune system, and processing emotions and experiences. By establishing a consistent sleep routine and creating a restful environment, they ensure they wake up feeling refreshed and energized. Moreover, high-vibration people practice gratitude, which significantly impacts their health. By regularly expressing gratitude for the blessings in their lives, they cultivate a positive mindset that reduces stress and boosts their immune system. Gratitude helps them focus on the positive aspects of their lives, fostering a sense of contentment and well-being. Their radiant health is also a reflection of their ability to let go of negativity. High-vibration people don't dwell on past hurts or hold on to grudges. Instead, they focus on forgiveness and healing, allowing them to maintain a light and joyful energy. This positive attitude enables them to navigate life's challenges with grace and resilience. Letting go of negativity not only frees up mental and emotional space but also has a profound impact on their physical health. Their spiritual practices play a vital role in their radiant health. High-vibration individuals often engage in activities that connect them to their higher selves and the universe, such as meditation, prayer, and expressing gratitude. These practices help them maintain a sense of peace and trust in the divine plan, reinforcing their positive outlook on life. Spiritual practices provide a source of strength and comfort, helping them stay grounded and centered even in difficult times. High-vibration people are known for their unwavering optimism, a quality that allows them to maintain a positive outlook on life regardless of the challenges they encounter. This optimism is deeply rooted in their understanding that every experience, whether good or bad, offers valuable lessons and opportunities for growth. Their high vibrational state naturally supports this positive mindset, enabling them to see the best in every situation. One of the key reasons for their unwavering optimism is their ability to reframe negative experiences. High-vibration individuals possess a unique perspective that allows them to view setbacks and obstacles as temporary and surmountable. Rather than dwelling on what went wrong, they focus on what they can learn from the experience and how they can move forward. This positive reframing helps them maintain a sense of hope and possibility even in adversity. Their optimism is also fueled by a strong sense of purpose and direction. High-vibration people are often clear about their goals and values, which provides them with a strong foundation for navigating life's challenges. This clarity allows them to stay focused on their long-term vision, even when faced with short-term setbacks. They recognize that challenges are a part of the journey and remain committed to their path, understanding that persistence and a positive attitude will ultimately lead them to their desired outcomes. Another factor contributing to their unwavering optimism is their use of positive affirmations and visualization. High-vibration individuals regularly use affirmations to reinforce their positive beliefs and intentions. By repeating positive statements about themselves and their lives, they strengthen their mindset and enhance their ability to attract positive experiences. Visualization further supports their optimism by allowing them to see their goals and dreams as already achieved, creating a powerful sense of confidence and motivation. High-vibration people also benefit from a strong support network of like-minded individuals. They surround themselves with people who uplift and inspire them, creating a positive and nurturing environment. This supportive network provides encouragement and motivation, helping them maintain optimism even during challenging times. By sharing experiences and learning from others, they build a sense of community and resilience that reinforces their positive outlook. Their unwavering optimism is also closely linked to their spiritual practices. High-vibration individuals often engage in activities that connect them to their higher selves and the universe, such as meditation, prayer, and gratitude. These practices help them maintain a sense of peace and trust in the divine plan, reinforcing their belief that everything happens for a reason and that they are always guided and supported. This spiritual connection provides them with a deep sense of inner strength and optimism, enabling them to face life's challenges with confidence and grace. In addition to these practices, high-vibration people have developed a strong sense of resilience and adaptability. They understand that life is full of unexpected twists and turns, and they are prepared to adjust their plans and expectations as needed. This flexibility allows them to navigate changes and uncertainties with ease, maintaining their positive outlook and finding new opportunities in every situation. High-vibration individuals also prioritize self-care and well-being, which plays a crucial role in sustaining their optimism. They understand the importance of nurturing their physical, emotional, and mental health to ensure they have the energy and vitality needed to pursue their goals. Their holistic approach to self-care includes regular exercise, healthy eating, adequate rest, and engaging in activities that bring them joy and fulfillment. By taking care of themselves, they create a strong foundation for their optimism and overall well-being. High-vibration people make gratitude a cornerstone of their optimism. They consistently focus on the positive aspects of their lives and express appreciation for their blessings. This mindset of gratitude helps them stay grounded and present, continually reminding them of the abundance and beauty that surrounds them. Their unwavering optimism also extends to their interactions with others. High-vibration individuals are often compassionate and empathetic, offering support and encouragement to those around them. They believe in the potential of others and inspire them to see the positive side of life. This optimistic outlook creates a ripple effect, spreading positivity and hope to everyone they encounter. Their genuine care and kindness make them beacons of light in their communities, uplifting and inspiring those around them. High-vibration people understand the power of intention and focus. They are deliberate in their thoughts and actions, consciously directing their energy towards positive and constructive endeavors. This intentional focus helps them stay aligned with their goals and maintain a positive trajectory, even when faced with challenges. By harnessing the power of intention, they create a life that reflects their highest aspirations and dreams. They also possess a magnetic aura that naturally draws others to them. This aura reflects their high vibrational state and the positive energy they radiate. People are naturally attracted to their warmth, kindness, and authenticity, which makes them highly influential and inspiring. Their magnetic aura results from their inner alignment and self-awareness. High-vibration individuals are in tune with their true selves and live in accordance with their values and beliefs, making them genuine and trustworthy. High-vibration people exude confidence and self-assuredness. They believe in their worth and abilities, which makes them magnetic to others. This confidence is not arrogance but rather a deep-seated self-love and acceptance that inspires those around them. Their magnetic aura is further enhanced by their positive energy and attitude. High-vibration individuals approach life with enthusiasm and a sense of adventure, making them engaging and delightful to be around. Their positive outlook and joyful presence foster an uplifting environment that naturally attracts others. By recognizing and embodying these subtle yet profound traits, you can raise your own vibration and draw positivity into your life. As we wrap up this exploration of the hidden signs of high vibration people, it's evident that these individuals possess unique qualities that set them apart in meaningful ways. From their effortless manifestation and joyful presence to their radiant health, unwavering optimism, and magnetic aura, high vibration people inspire us to elevate our own lives. By understanding and embracing these characteristics, you can begin to cultivate a higher vibration within yourself, attracting positivity, abundance, and a deeper sense of fulfillment. Remember, raising your vibration is a personal journey that involves mindfulness, self-care, and a commitment to spiritual growth. As you integrate these practices into your daily routine, you'll start to see positive changes and their impact on your overall well-being. Thank you for joining us in exploring these fascinating aspects of high vibration individuals. If you found this video insightful and want to continue your journey of spiritual growth and positivity, make sure to subscribe to Lightseekers. Together, we can elevate our vibrations and create a brighter, more joyful world. Until next time, stay positive, stay inspired, and keep shining light.